I knew the second I saw Patricia climbing out of her pristine white SUV that my Tuesday was about to go sideways. She had that particular look on her face, the one where her lips were pursed so tight they practically disappeared, and her designer sunglasses were pushed up into her blonde, highlighted hair like she meant business. I was standing in my driveway in Phoenix, Arizona, next to my Toyota forklift, which I just finished using to unload a pallet of equipment I needed for my warehouse business. "Excuse me," Patricia called out, her heels clicking on the hot asphalt as she marched toward my property. "We need to talk about that monstrosity you have parked in your driveway." I wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand and turned to face her fully. The Arizona sun was brutal today, even for late October. "Patricia, right? You're the HOA president, that's correct. And you must be Samuel Norton, the new homeowner in Lot 47. She stopped about 10 feet away, crossing her arms. "I'm here to inform you that your forklift violates multiple sections of our community standards." I glanced back at the forklift. It was a standard warehouse model, nothing fancy, but it was essential for my business. "It's just parked here temporarily while I unload some equipment. I'll have it back at my warehouse by tonight." "That's not the point," Patricia snapped. "The HOA bylaws clearly state that commercial vehicles are not permitted to be visible from the street. This includes forklifts, delivery trucks, and any other industrial equipment. You received a copy of these bylaws when you purchased your home 3 months ago." I had received those bylaws. All 73 pages of them. I'd skimmed through the major points, but apparently missed the section about commercial vehicles. To be fair, I didn't think having a forklift in my driveway for a few hours would trigger the HOA police. "Look, I understand there are rules," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "But this is a one-time thing. I'm moving some heavy equipment and I need the forklift to do it safely. It'll be gone by 6 o'clock tonight." Patricia shook her head firmly. "That's unacceptable. The bylaws exist for a reason. They maintain our property values and ensure our neighborhood remains an attractive place to live. If I let you slide on this, then everyone will think they can bend the rules. I'm not asking you to let me slide. I'm telling you I'll have it moved in a few hours. It's not like I'm setting up a construction yard in my driveway. The rules are the rules, Mr. Norton." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of the forklift from multiple angles. "I'm documenting this violation for the HOA board. You'll be receiving a formal notice within 48 hours, along with a fine of $500 for the first offense. $500 for having a forklift in my driveway for a few hours." I felt my jaw clench but forced myself to stay calm. "You're seriously going to fine me $500? That's the penalty structure outlined in the bylaws. Second offense is $1,000. Third offense, we can place a lien on your property." She continued snapping photos, making sure to get shots from every angle like she was documenting a crime scene. I took a deep breath. Getting angry wouldn't help anything. "Patricia, can we be reasonable here? I run a distribution business. I supply products to various stores throughout the Phoenix metro area. Sometimes, I need to bring equipment home for repairs or maintenance. This isn't going to be a regular thing, but it might happen occasionally." "Then I suggest you find alternative arrangements," she said, finally lowering her phone. "Perhaps you could park your commercial vehicles at your warehouse, which I assume is located in a properly zoned commercial area." "I do park them there. But sometimes, like today, I need to transport equipment. I can't exactly fit a pallet of industrial shelving in the back of my sedan." Patricia's expression didn't soften one bit. "That sounds like a personal problem, Mr. Norton. The HOA's responsibility is to maintain community standards, not to accommodate every homeowner's business needs. I'm sure you understood that when you decided to purchase property in Sunset Ridge Estates. The way she said it made my blood pressure rise. I'd moved to this neighborhood because it was close to my warehouse, and the houses were nice. The HOA seemed like a minor inconvenience at the time, something I'd deal with when necessary. I never imagined I'd be dealing with someone who treated homeowner association rules like they were federal law. "Fine," I said. "I'll move the forklift right now. Will that satisfy you? The violation has already occurred, so the fine still stands. But yes, removing the equipment immediately would prevent any additional penalties." She tucked her phone back into her designer purse. "I'm glad we could have this conversation, Mr. Norton. I hope you'll be more mindful of our community standards in the future." She turned on her heel and walked back to her SUV, leaving me standing there in disbelief. I'd just been hit with a $500 fine for parking my own equipment in my own driveway for a few hours. This was exactly the kind of ridiculous HOA nonsense I'd heard horror stories about but never experienced firsthand. I called my warehouse manager, Tony, and asked him to send someone to pick up the forklift immediately. Then, I went inside my house, cranked up the air conditioning, and tried to cool down in more ways than one. My wife, Jennifer, wasn't going to be happy about this fine. We just closed on this house and were still dealing with moving expenses. 2 days later, just as Patricia had promised, I received a formal notice from the Sunset Ridge Estates HOA. It was delivered via certified mail, which seemed excessive, but apparently that was their standard procedure. The letter outlined my violation in excruciating detail, including timestamps based on when Patricia had taken her photos. According to the document, my forklift had been visible from the street for approximately 4 hours and 23 minutes, constituting a severe breach of community standards. The $500 fine was due within 30 days. Failure to pay would result in additional late fees and potential legal action. There was also a stern warning about future violations, and a reminder that the HOA board met monthly to review ongoing issues. My name would be added to the agenda for the next meeting in 3 weeks. I showed the letter to Jennifer that evening over dinner. She read it twice, her expression growing more incredulous with each pass. "This is insane," she said, setting the letter down on the kitchen table. $500 for having a forklift in the driveway for a few hours. That's what I said. But apparently, Patricia takes her job as HOA president very seriously. Jennifer shook her head. "I knew we should have read those bylaws more carefully before buying here. My friend Rachel warned me about HOAs. She said they are all power trips waiting to happen." I didn't think it would be this bad. Most HOAs just care about keeping lawns mowed and houses painted. I didn't realize they'd police every single thing. "What are you going to do?" I'd been thinking about that question all day. Part of me wanted to fight it, to push back against what seemed like an absurd overreach. But another part of me knew that fighting an HOA was often more trouble than it was worth. They had lawyers on retainer and deep pockets funded by everyone's dues. I was just one homeowner. "I guess I'll pay the fine," I said reluctantly, "and make sure I never park anything even remotely commercial looking in the driveway again. That seems unfair. You should at least try to appeal it." "To who?" "Patricia runs the board. I doubt the other members are going to overrule her on something she's clearly passionate about." Jennifer didn't argue, but I could tell she wasn't satisfied with my answer. Neither was I, honestly. But sometimes you had to pick your battles, and going to war with the HOA over a parking violation didn't seem like the hill to die on. I wrote a check for $500 and mailed it to the HOA the following week. It hurt to write it, but I figured that would be the end of the matter. I'd learned my lesson. Patricia had flexed her authority and we could all move on. Except Patricia wasn't done with me. 3 weeks after the forklift incident, I received another notice from the HOA. This time, the violation was for having my trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day. According to the bylaws, trash cans could only be placed at the curb after 6 p.m. the evening before collection and had to be removed by 8 p.m. on collection day. I'd brought my cans back from the curb around 9 p.m., a full hour past the deadline. The fine was $250. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the notice in disbelief. Someone had been watching my house, timing when I brought my trash cans back from the curb. And that someone was almost certainly Patricia. The next violation came 2 weeks later. Apparently, my front yard had several weeds growing near the sidewalk that exceeded the 3-inch height limit specified in the landscaping section of the bylaws. I hadn't even noticed the weeds. They were tiny things, barely visible unless you were specifically looking for them. But Patricia had found them, photographed them with a ruler for scale, and documented the violation. Another $250 fine. Then came the notice about my mailbox post needing fresh paint. Then one about parking my truck too close to the sidewalk, allegedly blocking pedestrian access even though there was still 4 feet of clearance. Each violation came with its own fine, and each one felt more petty than the last. Jennifer was furious. "She's targeting you," she said after the 5th notice arrived. "This is harassment." "Technically, she's just enforcing the rules," I said, though I agreed with her assessment. "The bylaws cover all this stuff. I just never realized how detailed they were. Nobody could possibly follow all of these rules all the time. There are 73 pages of them. She's singling you out because you pushed back about the forklift." She was probably right. I'd noticed that other houses in the neighborhood had occasional violations that seemed to go unnoticed. My neighbor 3 doors down had a boat in his driveway that had been there for weeks. Another neighbor had landscaping that was overgrown and poorly maintained. But Patricia wasn't sending them violation notices every other week. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting. If Patricia wanted to play hardball, I could at least show up and advocate for myself. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse, a modest building near the neighborhood entrance that hosted various social events throughout the year. When I arrived, there were about a dozen other homeowners present, along with the 5-member HOA board. Patricia sat at the center of the table at the front of the room, looking very official with a gavel and a stack of papers in front of her. The other board members were neighbors I'd seen around but never really talked to. The meeting started with standard business: minutes from the last meeting, financial reports, updates on community maintenance projects. It was all fairly boring until we reached the section for homeowner concerns. Patricia looked directly at me. "Mr. Norton, I see you're on the agenda for tonight. Would you like to address the board?" I stood up, suddenly aware that everyone in the room was looking at me. "Yes, thank you. I wanted to talk about the violation notices I've been receiving. Over the past 2 months, I've gotten 6 different citations for various issues. Some of them seem, well, extremely minor. I'm concerned that I'm being unfairly targeted." Patricia's expression remained neutral. "The HOA enforces all violations equally, Mr. Norton. If you're receiving multiple notices, it's because you're committing multiple violations. Perhaps you should take more care to follow the community standards." I understand that, but I've noticed other homeowners have similar issues that don't seem to be addressed. There's a boat parked 3 houses down from me that's been there for over a month. The commercial vehicle restrictions should apply to that too, right? If you'd like to report a violation, You can submit it through the proper channels, Patricia said coolly. But we're here to discuss your violations, not your neighbors. One of the other board members, an older gentleman named Richard, spoke up. Patricia, might I suggest that we consider intent here? If Mr. Norton is making good faith efforts to comply, perhaps we could work with him rather than immediately issuing fines. The bylaws don't make exceptions for intent, Patricia replied. They exist to maintain standards. If we start making exceptions, the whole system falls apart. Another board member, a woman named Susan, nodded in agreement. Patricia's right. We can't play favorites. The rules apply to everyone equally. I could see this wasn't going anywhere. The board was backing Patricia, probably because she'd been president for years, and most of them didn't want to rock the boat. I sat back down, feeling frustrated but not surprised. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, covering various community issues. I barely paid attention, too busy thinking about my situation. When it finally ended, I headed for the parking lot, ready to go home and figure out my next move. Richard caught up with me before I reached my truck. Mr. Norton, can I have a word? I stopped and turned to face him. Sure. He glanced back at the clubhouse, making sure we were alone. Look, I shouldn't be saying this, but you're right. Patricia has been particularly focused on your property. She does this sometimes when someone challenges her authority. The forklift thing really bothered her. So what am I supposed to do? Just keep paying fines for minor violations? Richard shrugged. You could fight it, but that means lawyers and appeals and a lot of hassle. Most people just try to stay under her radar and wait it out. Eventually, she'll move on to someone else. That's not exactly reassuring. I know. But that's the reality of HOA politics. Patricia has been president for 5 years. She's got the other board members in her pocket, and she knows the bylaws inside and out. Going up against her is a losing battle. I thanked Richard for his honesty and drove home. Jennifer was waiting up for me, curious about how the meeting went. I filled her in on everything, including my conversation with Richard. This is ridiculous, she said. There has to be something we can do. Short of selling the house and moving, I'm not sure what. We can't fight the HOA without spending thousands on legal fees, and even then, we'd probably lose. We sat in silence for a while, both of us frustrated by the situation. I'd worked hard to build my distribution business, and now I was being nickel and dimed by a power-hungry HOA president who couldn't stand that I'd questioned her authority. My business, Norton Distribution, supplied various products to grocery stores and retailers throughout the Phoenix metro area. I'd started it 5 years ago with a single delivery van and had grown it into an operation with a warehouse, 3 trucks, and a dozen employees. We specialized in hard to find items and specialty products that the big distributors didn't want to bother with. It was a niche market, but it was profitable. One of my biggest clients was Fresh Mart, a local grocery chain with 5 locations around Phoenix. I supplied them with organic produce, specialty baking ingredients, imported goods, and various other products that their regular distributors didn't carry. It was a solid contract that represented about 30% of my annual revenue. What I didn't know until later was that Patricia shopped almost exclusively at the Fresh Mart location on Indian School Road, about 3 miles from our neighborhood. She was there at least 3 times a week, stocking up on the organic produce and specialty items that made Fresh Mart stand out from the competition. The items I supplied, in other words. I found this out during my regular meeting with Tom Rodriguez, the regional manager for Fresh Mart. We met monthly to review orders, discuss any issues, and plan for upcoming needs. This particular meeting was at the Indian School Road location, in Tom's office at the back of the store. "Business is good," Tom said, reviewing the latest sales figures. "Your organic produce line is flying off the shelves. We can barely keep those heirloom tomatoes in stock." "That's great to hear. My supplier in California has been really consistent with quality. Speaking of which, you think you could increase the frequency of deliveries? Right now you're coming twice a week, but with the demand we're seeing, 3 times a week would be better." I did some quick mental math. Adding another delivery day would require adjusting my routes and possibly bringing on another driver, but it was doable. "Yeah, I can make that work. Let me figure out the logistics and I'll get back to you with a revised schedule." We talked through a few more details, then Tom walked me out through the store. As we passed the produce section, I noticed a familiar face examining the organic lettuce display: Patricia. She was dressed casually, but still looked put together in a way that suggested she'd never truly relaxed in her life. She was scrutinizing each head of lettuce like she was inspecting diamonds, carefully checking for any imperfections before placing her selection in her cart. Tom noticed where I was looking. "Oh, that's Mrs. Morrison. She's one of our best customers. Comes in here all the time, always buying the premium organic stuff." Morrison. I'd never known Patricia's last name until that moment. "Yeah, she lives in my neighborhood, actually." "Small world," Tom said cheerfully. "She's very particular about her produce. Called us once because she found a single brown spot on a tomato. But hey, customers like her are why we stock the high-quality items you bring us." I nodded, my mind starting to turn over a very interesting realization. Patricia Morrison shopped at Fresh Mart. Fresh Mart depended heavily on my supply of organic and specialty products, which meant, in a roundabout way, that Patricia depended on my business without even knowing it. I didn't say anything to Tom about my ongoing issues with Patricia. It wasn't relevant to our business relationship, and I wasn't the type to bring personal drama into professional settings. But as I drove back to my warehouse, I couldn't stop thinking about the connection. Patricia had been making my life miserable for months now. The fines had added up to over $2,000, and I was constantly on edge, worried about the next violation notice. She'd even started sending notices about things that weren't actually violations, just things she claimed might become violations if left unchecked. It was harassment dressed up in official HOA language. But now, I knew something about her that she didn't know about me. If my business relationship with Fresh Mart ever ended, the store would lose a significant portion of its specialty inventory. The items that set them apart from competitors. The items that customers like Patricia specifically shopped there to buy. I wasn't planning to do anything with this information. Not immediately, anyway. But it was interesting to know that the woman who held so much power over my home life was inadvertently dependent on my business success. The violation notices kept coming. Patricia cited me for having Christmas lights up past the January 7th deadline specified in the bylaws. Then she got me for having a ladder visible in my backyard, which apparently violated the aesthetic standards for rear yards as viewed from neighboring properties. The ladder had been there for 2 days while I cleaned my gutters. Each fine was $250. Each one felt like Patricia was specifically watching my house, waiting for me to make any mistake, no matter how small. Jennifer and I started talking seriously about selling the house. Neither of us wanted to. We'd only been there 6 months, but the constant harassment was taking a toll. We were stressed all the time, worried about every little thing that might trigger another violation. It wasn't healthy. "Maybe we could find a place without an HOA," Jennifer suggested one evening. "I know they're harder to find in Phoenix, but they exist." We'd lose money on the sale. The market hasn't moved much since we bought, and with realtor fees, we'd be out at least $20,000. It might be worth it for our peace of mind. She was probably right, but I hated the idea of letting Patricia win. She'd effectively forced us out of our home through petty enforcement of bylaws. It felt wrong on a fundamental level. Then something happened that changed everything. I was at my warehouse on a Tuesday afternoon when Tom Rodriguez called me. His voice sounded stressed, which was unusual. Tom was normally calm and easygoing. "Sam, we've got a situation," he said. "Our main produce distributor just called. Their truck broke down somewhere near Tucson and they're not going to make today's delivery. We're going to be completely out of organic produce by tonight, and we've got nothing coming in tomorrow either. Is there any way you could increase your delivery for the rest of this week?" I pulled up my supply chain on my computer. "How much are you talking about?" "Double what you normally bring. Maybe triple if you can swing it. We'll take whatever you can get us. Our customers are going to be furious if we're out of organic options for 3 days. Let me make some calls. I'll get back to you within an hour." I spent the next 45 minutes on the phone with my suppliers in California and other vendors I worked with. It was going to be tight, but I could get Fresh Mart what they needed. It would require bringing in extra product, renting a refrigerated truck, and paying my drivers overtime, but it was doable. I called Tom back. "I can do it, but it's going to cost extra. Rush fees, equipment rental, overtime for my guys. We're talking about an additional 40% on top of the usual rate." "Done," Tom said immediately. "Get us that produce and bill us whatever you need. Corporate is freaking out about this. You're saving our necks here." I mobilized my team. By 6 p.m. that evening, we had a fully loaded refrigerated truck heading to all 5 Fresh Mart locations with enough organic produce to cover the gap left by their regular distributor. It was a logistical scramble, but we pulled it off. Tom called me the next morning, sounding relieved. "You're a lifesaver, Sam. The stores are stocked and customers are happy. Corporate wants to discuss expanding our contract with you. They're realizing how reliable you are compared to some of our other suppliers." That was good news for my business. But what happened next was even more interesting. On Thursday evening, Jennifer came home from work with a strange expression on her face. She worked as a marketing consultant and often heard local gossip through her various client connections. "You'll never guess what I heard today," she said, setting her laptop bag down on the kitchen counter. Apparently, Patricia Morrison had a complete meltdown at Fresh Mart yesterday. I looked up from the invoice I was reviewing. "What happened?" "She went in to buy her usual organic produce, and they were completely out of everything. She demanded to speak to the manager, claimed the store was going downhill, threatened to shop somewhere else, made a huge scene in front of other customers." I felt a small smile creep across my face. Really? My client was there and witnessed the whole thing. She said Patricia was acting like they'd personally betrayed her by being out of organic lettuce. The staff was trying to explain that their supplier had an issue but more product was coming, but Patricia wouldn't listen. She apparently said something about how this was unacceptable for a store of Fresh Mart's caliber. "Huh," I said, keeping my expression neutral. But inside, I was connecting the dots. Patricia had shown up at Fresh Mart on Tuesday evening, right after their regular distributor failed to deliver, and before my emergency supply run had arrived. She'd experienced exactly what it was like when my products weren't available. Jennifer studied my face. "Why are you smiling like that?" "Am I smiling?" "Yes, you definitely are. What's going on?" I explained about Tom's emergency call, about how Fresh Mart's regular produce distributor had failed, and how I'd stepped in to save the day. I told her about the expanded contract discussions and how my business relationship with Fresh Mart was actually growing stronger. So, when Patricia had her meltdown, I concluded, it was because the products I supply weren't there yet. The organic produce, the specialty items, all the stuff that makes Fresh Mart special, that's mostly what I bring them. Jennifer's eyes widened. Oh my God, she has no idea. Nope. Are you going to tell her? That was the question I'd been wrestling with since Tom first called. Part of me wanted to march over to Patricia's house and explain exactly how dependent she was on the business she'd been making miserable. But another part of me knew that would be petty and unprofessional. I don't know, I admitted. Probably not. It's not like it would change anything. But fate, as it turned out, had other plans. The following week, I received yet another violation notice from the HOA. This one was for parking my work truck in my driveway overnight. The truck in question was a standard Ford F-150, the kind that thousands of people drove for both personal and business use. I'd been parking it in my driveway for months without issue. But according to Patricia's notice, the truck had commercial plates and company logos on the doors, which classified it as a commercial vehicle. Commercial vehicles weren't allowed to be visible from the street overnight. The fine was $500, and the notice stated that the truck must be removed immediately or face additional penalties of $250 per day. This was the last straw. The truck was how I got to work every day. I couldn't afford to rent a separate parking space just to keep Patricia happy, and I wasn't about to buy a second personal vehicle just to comply with HOA rules. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Michelle Sanders, and she specialized in HOA disputes. I explained my situation, including the months of harassment and the increasingly petty violations. Michelle listened carefully, asked several questions about the bylaws and the specific violations, and then gave me her assessment. You have a possible case for selective enforcement, she said. If other homeowners have similar violations that aren't being cited, that's a pattern of discrimination. However, fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. The legal fees could easily run into tens of thousands of dollars, and there's no guarantee you'd win. So, what do you recommend? Honestly, try to resolve it directly first. Request a formal meeting with the board, bring evidence of selective enforcement, and see if you can get them to back down. If that doesn't work, you could try mediation. Going to court should be your last resort. I thanked her for the advice and ended the call feeling even more frustrated. The system was rigged in favor of the HOA. They had all the power, and homeowners had very little recourse short of expensive legal battles. That evening, I sat down and drafted a formal letter to the HOA board requesting a special meeting to discuss the violation notices I'd been receiving. I included documentation of other similar violations in the neighborhood that hadn't been cited, photographs with dates and addresses. I kept the tone professional and factual, but made it clear that I believed I was being unfairly targeted. I delivered the letter to the HOA management company the next day via certified mail, ensuring there was a paper trail. 2 weeks later, I received a response. The board agreed to meet with me, but the meeting would be at Patricia's discretion since she was the president. The date was set for 3 weeks out, which seemed deliberately designed to make me wait and worry. In the meantime, life continued. My business was growing thanks to the expanded contract with Fresh Mart. Tom and I had worked out a new delivery schedule that included 3 visits per week instead of 2. And I was bringing in additional product lines that Fresh Mart wanted to test in their stores. The additional income from the expanded contract more than covered the HOA fines I'd been paying, which was some consolation. but it was the principle of the thing. I shouldn't have to pay thousands of dollars in fines for minor violations while my business thrived. The special HOA meeting finally arrived. It was held on a Thursday evening, again at the community clubhouse. This time, only the board members were present. Patricia sat at her usual spot in the center, flanked by the 4 other board members. I had prepared a presentation on my laptop, with photographs and documentation of everything I wanted to discuss. Jennifer came with me for moral support, sitting in the audience section while I stood at the front of the room. Patricia called the meeting to order. "Mr. Norton, you requested this meeting to discuss the violation notices you've been receiving. The board has reviewed your letter and supporting materials. Please proceed with your statement." I connected my laptop to the projector and pulled up the first slide. It showed a photo of my work truck parked in my driveway, followed by photos of 3 other trucks in the neighborhood that were similar. "Thank you for meeting with me," I began. "Over the past 4 months, I've received 12 violation notices from the HOA, resulting in fines totaling $3,250. I believe these violations have been selectively enforced, and I have evidence to support that claim." I walked them through each violation and showed corresponding examples from other properties in the neighborhood. The boat parked 3 houses down that had been there for months. Multiple trucks with commercial plates parked in driveways. Trash cans left out past the deadline. Weeds in various yards. Paint peeling on mailboxes. Each of these violations mirrors the ones I've been cited for, I explained. Yet these homeowners haven't received notices or fines. This suggests that the bylaws are being enforced selectively, which violates the HOA's own charter requiring equal treatment of all residents. Patricia's expression remained stone-faced throughout my presentation. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Norton, the HOA board appreciates you bringing these concerns to our attention. However, the presence of other violations doesn't excuse your own. If you're aware of these issues, you're welcome to submit formal complaints and we'll investigate them accordingly." "I'm not trying to excuse anything," I said. "I'm trying to show a pattern of selective enforcement. Why have I received 12 violations in 4 months when these other examples have been ongoing for much longer without any notices?" Richard, the board member who'd spoken to me before, cleared his throat. "Patricia, I think Mr. Norton has a valid point. The documentation he's provided does suggest some inconsistency in our enforcement." "Enforcement happens when violations are observed and reported," Patricia replied smoothly. "If Mr. Norton's violations were noticed and reported more frequently, that's simply how the system works. We can't be everywhere at once." Susan, another board member, nodded. "The HOA relies on residents to report violations. It's not our job to patrol the neighborhood looking for problems." "But someone has been patrolling my property specifically," I countered. "These violations were discovered and documented very quickly after they occurred. The trash can violation was noticed within 1 hour of the deadline. The weeds were barely visible. Someone is watching my house specifically and looking for reasons to cite me." The room fell silent. Everyone knew I was talking about Patricia, but nobody wanted to say it directly. Patricia finally spoke. "Mr. Norton, I live 2 streets over from you. I drive past your property regularly on my way in and out of the neighborhood. If I happen to notice violations while driving by, it's my responsibility as HOA president to document them. That's not harassment, that's doing my job. Driving by multiple times per day to check for violations that have 1-hour deadlines seems excessive," I said. "I resent the implication that I'm harassing you." Patricia's voice rose slightly. "I enforce the bylaws equally for all residents." If you feel that's unfair, perhaps you should have considered whether this community was the right fit before purchasing here. Jennifer spoke up from the audience. He's paid over $3,000 in fines for minor violations in 4 months. That's not equal enforcement, that's targeting. Patricia's face flushed red. Madam, you're not part of this formal meeting. Please refrain from speaking out of turn. She's my wife, I said, and she has every right to be concerned about this situation. The tension in the room was thick. Richard tried to diffuse it. Perhaps we could agree to a monitoring period. The board will make an effort to ensure enforcement is consistent across the neighborhood, and Mr. Norton will make every effort to comply with the bylaws. We could revisit this in 3 months and see if the situation has improved. It was a reasonable suggestion, but Patricia shot it down immediately. The bylaws don't require monitoring periods or special treatment. Mr. Norton needs to comply with the rules like everyone else. If he continues to violate community standards, he'll continue to receive citations. It's that simple. I could see there was no winning here. Patricia had the board in her pocket, and she wasn't going to back down. The meeting concluded shortly after, with the board agreeing to take my concerns under consideration, but making no concrete commitments to change anything. As Jennifer and I walked to our car, I felt defeated. I'd presented clear evidence of selective enforcement, and it hadn't mattered. Patricia was going to continue harassing me, and there was nothing I could do about it short of selling the house or bankrupting myself in legal fees. "This is insane," Jennifer said once we were in the car. "She's completely unreasonable. I know. But she has all the power here. The board backs her, and the bylaws give her the authority to enforce whatever she wants." We drove home in frustrated silence. I was seriously starting to consider selling the house, financial loss or not. Living under constant threat of violation notices was affecting my quality of life and my mental health. But then something happened that shifted the entire dynamic. The next morning, Tom Rodriguez called me with unexpected news. "Sam, I need to talk to you about something serious. Fresh Mart Corporate is considering dropping several of our current suppliers and consolidating with fewer, more reliable vendors. Your name is at the top of the list for expanded partnership." "That's great," I said, though Tom's tone suggested there was more to the story. "It is great for you, but it means we'd be giving you exclusive contracts for several product categories that currently have other suppliers. Organic produce, specialty baking ingredients, imported goods, the whole 9 yards. You'd basically become our primary specialty supplier for all Phoenix locations." I sat up straighter in my office chair. "That's a significant expansion. It's huge. We're talking about tripling your current volume minimum. But there's a catch. Corporate wants to ensure you can handle it. They want to tour your facilities, meet your team, and review your supply chain. If everything checks out, they'll draw up the new contracts." "When are they thinking about doing this?" "Next week. I know it's fast, but they want to make a decision by the end of the month." We talked through the details for another 20 minutes. This was the kind of business opportunity that could transform Norton Distribution from a solid small business into a major regional player. But it also meant significant investment in equipment, staff, and infrastructure. After hanging up with Tom, I spent the rest of the day running numbers and making plans. If I landed this contract, I'd need to lease additional warehouse space, buy at least 2 more delivery trucks, and hire several new employees. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure. I didn't think much about the HOA situation for the next few days. I was too busy preparing for the Fresh Mart corporate visit and making sure everything at my warehouse was perfect. The tour was scheduled for the following Tuesday. On Monday evening, I ran to Fresh Mart to pick up some dinner supplies. Jennifer was working late, and I needed to grab something quick. I'd deliberately chosen the location on Indian School Road, Patricia's preferred store, because it was on my way home from the warehouse. As I was checking out, I noticed Patricia in the next lane over. Her cart was loaded with organic produce, specialty items, and various products that I recognized as part of my supply line to Freshmart. She didn't notice me, too focused on criticizing the cashier's bagging technique. "Please be more careful with the tomatoes," she was saying in that particular tone she used when she wanted everyone to know she was dissatisfied. "They're organic and very delicate. They should be in their own bag." The young cashier apologized and adjusted the bagging. Patricia continued to supervise every item, making small comments about proper handling and expressing disappointment with various aspects of the service. I finished checking out and headed for the exit, but something made me pause. I watched Patricia complete her transaction, still criticizing the cashier's every move, and something clicked in my mind. This woman depended on these products. The organic tomatoes, the specialty lettuce, the imported olive oil, all of it came through my business. She didn't know it, but her ability to shop at Freshmart for the premium items she clearly valued was directly connected to my success as a supplier. I wasn't planning to use that information. It still felt petty and unprofessional to mix business with personal disputes. But I couldn't help wondering what would happen if Patricia knew the truth about who supplied her favorite store. The Freshmart corporate tour went extremely well. The executives were impressed with my warehouse organization, my supply chain management, and my team's professionalism. They asked detailed questions about my capacity for expansion and my financial stability. I'd prepared thoroughly, and it showed. At the end of the tour, the head of procurement, a sharp woman named Diana, pulled me aside. "Sam, I'm going to be straight with you. We're very impressed. We want to move forward with the expanded contract. Our lawyers will draft the paperwork, and we should have something for you to review by the end of the week." I shook her hand, trying to contain my excitement. "That's fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity. You've earned it. Tom speaks very highly of you, and your performance during the supply crisis last month showed us you're reliable under pressure. That's exactly what we need in a primary supplier." I drove home feeling like I was on top of the world. This contract would be life-changing for my business. It would require hard work and investment, but the potential returns were enormous. Jennifer was thrilled when I told her the news. We celebrated with wine and takeout, talking late into the night about what this could mean for our future. The HOA situation seemed less important in the face of such a major business success. But Patricia wasn't done with me yet. 2 days after the Freshmart corporate visit, I received the most absurd violation notice yet. According to Patricia's documentation, my garage door had been left open for more than 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon, violating the bylaw about maintaining a neat appearance of garage interiors as visible from the street. The fine was $500. I'd been at my warehouse all day Tuesday. My garage door had been closed. I had security camera footage to prove it. I immediately called the HOA management company and requested copies of Patricia's photographic evidence. They emailed me the files within an hour. The photos showed my house with the garage door open, but the timestamp on the photos was suspicious. They were taken at 11:30 a.m., which was when I'd briefly opened the garage to put some tools away before leaving for work. The garage door had been open for maybe 10 minutes, not 2 hours. I reviewed my security camera footage. Sure enough, I'd opened the garage at 11:28 a.m. and closed it at 11:37 a.m. 9 minutes total. This was documented fraud. Patricia had either lied about the duration or had deliberately misrepresented the facts to justify a fine. I called Michelle Sanders, the HOA lawyer I'd consulted before. I explained the situation and sent her the security footage along with Patricia's photos. "This is good," Michelle said after reviewing everything. "This is documented evidence of fraudulent violation notices. You could use this to challenge all of the previous violations, arguing that if Patricia is willing to lie about this one, her credibility on the others is questionable." What would that involve? Filing a formal dispute with the HOA, potentially taking it to arbitration or court if they don't resolve it internally. With this evidence, you'd have a strong case. The HOA might be willing to settle rather than risk exposure of their president's fraudulent enforcement practices. How much would this cost? I could handle the initial dispute filing and negotiations for around $5,000. If it goes to arbitration or court, costs would increase, but I think the HOA would want to settle once they see this evidence. I thought about it for a moment. $5,000 to potentially get back the $3,000 plus I'd already paid in fines and stop Patricia's harassment permanently. It was worth it. "Let's do it," I said. Michelle got to work immediately. She drafted a comprehensive dispute filing that included all 12 violations I'd received, the evidence of selective enforcement I'd presented at the board meeting, and the new evidence of fraudulent reporting on the garage door incident. She also included a demand for full refund of all fines paid and a formal apology from the HOA board. The filing was sent via certified mail to the HOA management company and to each board member individually, including Patricia. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Richard, the board member who'd been sympathetic to my situation. "Sam, we need to talk," he said, his voice serious. "The board received your lawyer's filing. Patricia is furious, but the rest of us are concerned. The evidence you've provided about the garage door incident is pretty damning. I have security footage that proves she lied about how long the door was open." "I believe you, and that's the problem. If she falsified one violation, it calls all the others into question. The board is meeting tomorrow night to discuss this. I think you should know that Susan and I are going to recommend settling your dispute and issuing a formal warning to Patricia about enforcement procedures." This was more than I'd expected. "What about the other 2 board members? David will probably vote with Patricia out of loyalty. Karen is on the fence, but even if it's 3-2, that's enough to overrule Patricia and resolve this. What happens to Patricia? That's up for discussion. At minimum, she'll be censured for improper enforcement. At maximum, the board could vote to remove her as president." I thanked Richard for the heads up and immediately called Michelle to update her. She was pleased with the development. "This is moving faster than I expected," she said. "If the board is willing to settle, we should be prepared to negotiate terms. What outcome do you want?" I thought about it. "Full refund of the fines I paid, an end to the targeted enforcement, and some kind of assurance that Patricia can't retaliate in the future. I'll draft settlement terms and send them to the board before their meeting." The next evening, while the board meeting was happening at the clubhouse, I stayed home and tried to distract myself with work. Jennifer kept checking her phone, as anxious as I was about the outcome. Around 9 p.m., Richard called. "It's done. The board voted 3-2 to accept the settlement terms. You'll get a full refund of all fines paid, $3,250. Patricia is being formally censured and removed as HOA president effective immediately. Susan is taking over as president. We're also implementing new enforcement procedures that require board approval before any fines over $200 are issued." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate you standing up for what was right. It wasn't just me. Once we saw the evidence of falsified violations, it was clear Patricia had overstepped. She's lucky we're not pursuing legal action against her personally for fraud. After hanging up, I told Jennifer the news. She actually cheered, pumping her fist in the air. Finally, she said. That woman got what she deserved. The refund check arrived 1 week later, along with a formal letter of apology from the HOA board. It acknowledged that the enforcement actions against me had been inappropriate and assured me that new procedures were in place to prevent similar issues in the future. Patricia was no longer president, but she was still on the board. I wondered how she was handling the demotion and the public rebuke. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I was just relieved that the harassment was over. I didn't see Patricia around the neighborhood for several weeks after that. She seemed to be keeping a low profile, which was probably wise given how the whole situation had unfolded. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. The expanded Fresh Mart contract had been finalized, and I was in the process of hiring new staff and leasing additional warehouse space. Norton Distribution was growing faster than I'd ever imagined possible. About a month after the settlement, I was making a delivery to the Fresh Mart location on Indian School Road when I encountered Patricia in the produce section. She was examining organic lettuce as usual and didn't notice me at first. I was pushing a dolly loaded with fresh produce toward the back warehouse area where the staff received deliveries. As I passed by the shopping area, Patricia looked up and our eyes met. Her expression went through several rapid changes: surprise, recognition, confusion, and then something that might have been embarrassment. She quickly looked away and focused intently on the lettuce in her hands. I continued past her and made the delivery. Tom was at the receiving area and helped me unload. "How's the expanded contract treating you?" he asked as we worked. "Great. We're keeping up with the increased volume and my new hires are working out well." "That's good to hear. Corporate is very happy with your reliability." We've actually gotten feedback from customers about how the produce quality has been consistently excellent lately. I thanked him and headed back toward the front of the store. Patricia was in the checkout line now, her cart still full of organic items. She didn't look up as I walked past, but I could tell she was aware of my presence. In that moment, I realized something. I could have told her. I could have walked up to Patricia right then and explained that I was the supplier behind all those organic products she loved so much. I could have made sure she knew that the business she'd been trying to destroy with HOA fines was the same business that supplied her favorite grocery store. But I didn't. It would have been petty and unprofessional, and honestly, I'd already won. Patricia had been removed as HOA president. I'd gotten my money back and my business was thriving. There was no need to rub salt in the wound. Besides, she'd figure it out eventually. That moment came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks later, Fresh Mart ran a promotional campaign highlighting their local suppliers. They put up displays throughout the store featuring photos and information about the various businesses that supplied their products. Tom asked me to participate, and I agreed, thinking it would be good publicity for Norton Distribution. The display included a large photo of me standing in front of my warehouse, along with information about my business and the products I supplied. It listed the organic produce, specialty items, and imported goods that came through my company. The display was prominently placed near the entrance of the store, impossible to miss. Jennifer texted me 3 days after the displays went up. She'd run into a friend at Fresh Mart who'd witnessed an interesting scene. "Patricia was at Fresh Mart today," the text read. "She saw your display, stood there staring at it for like 5 minutes, then left her full cart in the middle of the store and walked out without buying anything. My friend said she looked absolutely horrified. I couldn't help but smile. Patricia had finally connected the dots. The man she'd been harassing with HOA violations for months, the man whose business she'd tried to make difficult with constant fines, was the primary supplier to her favorite grocery store. I wondered if she realized the irony. All those times she'd shopped at Fresh Mart, carefully selecting organic produce and specialty items, she'd been benefiting from my business success. Every head of lettuce, every heirloom tomato, every bottle of imported olive oil had passed through my warehouse and been delivered by my trucks. And when she'd made that scene about Fresh Mart being out of organic produce during the supply crisis, she'd been complaining about the temporary absence of my products specifically. A few days later, I received an unexpected visitor at my warehouse. It was Patricia. She showed up on a Thursday afternoon, driving her pristine white SUV. I was in my office when my receptionist called to say someone was asking to see me. When I came out to the lobby and saw Patricia standing there, I was genuinely surprised. She looked uncomfortable, which was a far cry from the confident, authoritative person who'd been citing me for HOA violations just months earlier. "Mr. Norton," she said formally, "do you have a few minutes to talk?" I considered turning her away but decided to hear her out. I led her to a small conference room we used for meetings with clients. Once we were seated, Patricia took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. I saw the display at Fresh Mart. I didn't realize you were the supplier for those products. Would it have mattered if you'd known?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She looked down at her hands. "Honestly, I don't know. Probably not at first. I was so focused on enforcing the HOA bylaws that I didn't think about who you were as a person or what you did for a living." "You falsified at least one violation report," I said bluntly. "The garage door incident. That wasn't about enforcing bylaws, that was about trying to force me out of the neighborhood." Patricia's face reddened. "I know. I was angry that you challenged me at the board meeting. I felt like you were undermining my authority, and I wanted to prove that I was right to enforce the rules strictly. It was wrong, and I'm sorry." I studied her face, trying to determine if the apology was genuine or just motivated by the awkward situation she'd found herself in. "Why are you here, Patricia? If it's just to apologize, you could have sent a letter." "I wanted to apologize in person, and I wanted to ask you not to retaliate against me." "Retaliate how? By refusing to supply Fresh Mart, or by making sure I can't shop there?" "I know that sounds ridiculous, but I don't know what else you might do. You have power over something that's important to me, just like I had power over you through the HOA." I almost laughed. "Patricia, I'm not going to stop supplying Fresh Mart because of a personal dispute. That would hurt my business and affect thousands of customers who have nothing to do with this situation. I'm a professional." She looked relieved. "Thank you. I wasn't sure what to expect. But I want you to understand something," I continued. "What you did to me wasn't just annoying, it was genuinely harmful. You cost me thousands of dollars and months of stress over minor violations that you enforced selectively. You made me feel unwelcome in my own home. If I hadn't had the resources to fight back legally, you might have succeeded in forcing me to sell at a loss and move. I understand that now. I got caught up in the power of the HOA position and lost perspective. The board was right to remove me as president." We sat in silence for a moment. I believed her apology was genuine, but I also knew that people like Patricia didn't usually change overnight. She'd had a moment of clarity because her actions had consequences that affected her personally. But that didn't mean she'd suddenly become a different person. "I accept your apology," I finally said, "but I think we're done here. You should probably shop at a different Fresh Mart location going forward, not because I'm banning you, but because it'll be less awkward for both of us." Patricia nodded and stood up. "That's fair." Again, "I'm sorry for everything." After she left, I sat in the conference room for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. Part of me felt vindicated. Patricia had been forced to confront the consequences of her actions in a very direct way. But another part of me just felt tired. The whole situation had been exhausting and unnecessary. Life settled into a comfortable routine after that. The expanded Fresh Mart contract kept me busy, but was manageable with the additional staff I'd hired. Jennifer and I enjoyed living in the neighborhood now that the HOA drama was over. Susan, the new HOA president, was reasonable and fair, enforcing rules consistently but without Patricia's vindictive edge. I occasionally saw Patricia around the neighborhood. We never spoke, just exchanged brief nods if we happened to make eye contact. She was quieter now, less involved in HOA activities despite still being on the board. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that she'd started shopping at a different grocery chain, which was probably for the best. The following spring, about 8 months after the whole ordeal started, I attended an HOA board meeting to vote on a proposal for new community landscaping. It was a routine matter, and the meeting was brief and cordial. As people were leaving, Richard pulled me aside. "I wanted to thank you again for how you handled the situation with Patricia. A lot of people would have made it worse, but you took the high road." "I just wanted it to be over," I said honestly. "Well, you made a positive impact on how this HOA operates. The new enforcement procedures we put in place, because of your case, have made things fairer for everyone. We've had fewer complaints and better board relations in the past 6 months than we did in the previous 3 years." That was gratifying to hear. Maybe some good had come out of the whole mess after all. My business continued to grow. Fresh Mart expanded to 2 additional locations, and I secured the supply contracts for both new stores. Norton Distribution hired more drivers, leased more warehouse space, and developed relationships with new suppliers to meet the increasing demand. Jennifer and I talked about moving to a bigger house, but ultimately decided to stay where we were. We'd fought for our right to live in peace in this neighborhood, and we'd won. There was something satisfying about staying and enjoying the home we'd chosen, free from HOA harassment. I sometimes thought about the chain of events that had led from Patricia demanding I remove my forklift to her standing in my warehouse office apologizing. It was a reminder that everyone's lives are interconnected in ways we don't always see. Patricia had power over me through the HOA, but I had power over her quality of life through my business, and neither of us had realized it until circumstances forced the connection into the open. The lesson I took from it was to treat people decently, not just because it was morally right, but because you never knew how your actions might circle back to affect you. Patricia had learned that lesson the hard way. One afternoon, about a year after the forklift incident that started everything, I was making a delivery to Fresh Mart when I saw something that made me pause. There was a new display in the organic produce section with a sign that read, "Locally sourced by Norton Distribution." Tom walked up beside me, grinning. Corporate wanted to highlight local suppliers even more prominently. "Your company name is now on signage throughout all the stores. Good for your brand recognition." I looked at the sign, feeling a sense of pride. Norton Distribution had grown from a scrappy small business into a recognized name in the Phoenix grocery supply chain. And it had happened despite Patricia's best efforts to make my life difficult. "Thanks, Tom. I appreciate Fresh Mart's support. You've earned it, man." Reliability matters in this business, and you've delivered consistently for years now." As I finished the delivery and drove back to my warehouse, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. I'd faced harassment from an overzealous HOA president, fought back successfully, and grown my business to new heights. Patricia had been removed from power, forced to confront her own behavior, and hopefully learn something about fairness and perspective. The neighborhood was peaceful now. My truck sat in my driveway without generating violation notices. My Christmas lights stayed up for a reasonable amount of time without triggering fines. My trash cans occasionally came back from the curb a bit late without anyone documenting it as a crisis. The HOA still had rules and they were still enforced, but it was done fairly and consistently. That was all anyone could really ask for. Sometimes at night, when I was sitting on my back patio enjoying the Arizona weather, I thought about that first confrontation with Patricia over the forklift. If someone had told me then that the whole situation would lead to me expanding my business and Patricia apologizing in my warehouse office, I wouldn't have believed them. Life was strange that way. The things that seemed like disasters in the moment often turned out to be opportunities in disguise. Patricia's harassment had forced me to document everything carefully, which led to uncovering her fraudulent violation reports, which led to her removal as president, which made the neighborhood a better place to live. And the connection between my business and Fresh Mart, which had always been there but unnoticed, became a source of leverage that ultimately made Patricia realize she couldn't act with impunity. The grocery store products she valued came from the business of the man she'd been targeting. That was karma in its purest form. Jennifer and I hosted a barbecue that summer, inviting neighbors over to celebrate our first full year in the house. It was a good turnout, with people from throughout the subdivision stopping by. The new HOA president, Susan, came with her husband. Richard and his wife were there too. Even some of the neighbors whose violations I'd documented during my dispute with Patricia showed up, apparently harboring no hard feelings. Patricia wasn't invited, and nobody seemed to expect her to be there. She'd become somewhat isolated in the neighborhood after being removed as president, which was unfortunate but probably inevitable. When you build your identity around having authority over others, losing that authority leaves a vacuum. As the evening wound down and guests started heading home, Richard lingered to help clean up. "This was nice," he said, carrying empty bottles to the recycling bin. "The neighborhood feels different now, more relaxed." "Patricia really did make everyone tense," Jennifer observed. "I didn't realize how much until it stopped." Richard nodded. "She meant well in her own way. She genuinely believed that strict enforcement of rules maintained property values. But she lost sight of the fact that neighborhoods are communities of people, not just collections of properties to be managed." It was a generous interpretation, more generous than I might have offered, but Richard was probably right. Patricia wasn't evil, just misguided about what her role should be and unwilling to accept challenges to her authority. The following week, I was at my warehouse going through quarterly financial reports when Tom called with unexpected news. "Sam, I wanted to give you a heads up. Fresh Mart is being acquired by a larger regional chain. The deal should close within 3 months." My heart sank. Acquisitions often meant consolidation of suppliers and renegotiation of contracts. What does that mean for our arrangement? Honestly, I don't know yet. The acquiring company has their own supply relationships, but they're also committed to maintaining Fresh Mart's brand identity, which includes local sourcing. I'm going to advocate hard for keeping you on, but I can't make promises. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Just when everything had stabilized and the business was thriving, uncertainty appeared again. Such was the nature of being a supplier. You were always somewhat at the mercy of your client's business decisions. I spent the next few weeks diversifying my client base, reaching out to other grocery chains and retailers about supply contracts. I'd been so focused on Fresh Mart that I'd let other relationships atrophy. That was a mistake I needed to correct regardless of what happened with the acquisition. The acquisition closed on schedule, and the new ownership brought in their team to evaluate operations at all Fresh Mart locations. I met with them twice, presenting information about Norton Distribution's capabilities and reliability. They were polite, but non-committal. 2 months after the acquisition, I got the call from Tom. Good news. The new ownership wants to keep you on as the primary supplier for organic and specialty products. They reviewed your performance history and were impressed. The contract terms will change slightly, but it's basically the same arrangement. I felt relief wash over me. That's great, Tom. I was worried they'd want to bring in their own people. They considered it, but your track record spoke for itself. Plus, the customers have responded well to the local sourcing angle. It's part of Fresh Mart's brand identity now. Norton Distribution had survived another challenge. The business continued to grow, adding new product lines and expanding into neighboring markets. I hired a general manager to handle day-to-day operations, giving me more time to focus on strategy and business development. Jennifer got a promotion at her marketing firm. We started talking seriously about starting a family. Life was good, and the HOA drama that had consumed so much energy a year earlier felt like a distant memory. I saw Patricia one more time, about 18 months after the forklift incident. I was at a local coffee shop, grabbing a morning espresso before heading to the warehouse. She was in line ahead of me, ordering some complicated drink with specific instructions about milk temperature and foam consistency. When she turned to wait for her order, she saw me and froze momentarily. Then, to my surprise, she offered a small, somewhat sad smile. "Hello, Samuel. Patricia." We stood there awkwardly for a moment. She looked different, older somehow, though it had only been 18 months. The confidence and authority she'd projected before were gone, replaced by something that looked like weariness. "How have you been?" she asked, seemingly genuine in her curiosity. "Good. Busy with work. I'm managing. I actually moved out of Sunset Ridge Estates last month, needed a fresh start." I nodded, understanding what she meant. Staying in a neighborhood where she'd been removed as HOA president in disgrace couldn't have been easy. "Where did you move to?" "North Scottsdale. No HOA." She smiled slightly at the irony. "Turns out I don't actually enjoy living under strict community rules when I'm not the one enforcing them." The barista called her name, and she picked up her complicated coffee drink. "Take care, Samuel. I'm glad your business is doing well. I see the Norton Distribution trucks all over Phoenix now." "Thanks. Take care of yourself, Patricia." She left, and I waited for my much simpler coffee order. That brief encounter gave me a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Patricia had moved on, literally and figuratively. The chapter was finally, completely closed. That evening, I told Jennifer about running into Patricia. We were sitting on the back patio, enjoying the pleasant Arizona evening weather that made living in the desert worthwhile. "It's weird," I said. "I spent months being furious at her, and now I mostly just feel nothing, maybe a little bit of pity." "That's probably healthy," Jennifer replied. "Holding on to anger would just hurt you. She faced consequences for her actions and everyone moved on. That's how it should work." I wonder if she really learned anything, or if she's just bitter about getting caught. Jennifer shrugged. "Does it matter? She's not in your life anymore. You won, the business grew, the neighborhood is peaceful. Whatever Patricia learned or didn't learn is her problem now. She was right, as usual. I'd spent enough time thinking about Patricia Morrison and the HOA drama. It was time to focus on the future. Norton Distribution continued to thrive. 3 years after the forklift incident, I'd expanded to supplying 8 different grocery chains across Arizona and was exploring opportunities in New Mexico. The company employed over 50 people and operated out of 3 warehouse facilities. Jennifer and I had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. We stayed in Sunset Ridge Estates. In the house I'd almost been driven out of by HOA harassment. The neighborhood remained peaceful under Susan's measured leadership as HOA president. I occasionally thought about how different things might have been if Patricia had just been reasonable that first day, when she saw my forklift in the driveway. If she'd accepted my explanation that it would be moved by evening, if she'd shown a little flexibility and common sense, none of the subsequent drama would have occurred. But then again, if that hadn't happened, I might not have fought back, which led to her removal, which improved the neighborhood for everyone. And I might not have been motivated to expand my Fresh Mart contract so aggressively, which opened doors to other opportunities that grew my business exponentially. Sometimes the obstacles in life, the difficult people and frustrating situations, ended up being catalysts for positive change. Patricia had been my catalyst, even though that certainly wasn't her intention. The forklift itself, the piece of equipment that started everything, was still in regular use at my main warehouse. Every time I saw it, I was reminded of how a single confrontation on a hot Arizona afternoon had set off a chain of events that transformed both my business and my neighborhood. Life had a funny way of working out. The woman who tried to make my life miserable had inadvertently made it better. The power she'd wielded through the HOA had been nothing compared to the power I'd had through my business relationships, though neither of us had realized it at the time. And the moral of the story, if there was one, was simple. Treat people with respect and fairness, because you never know how your lives might be interconnected. Everyone has their own form of power and influence. Patricia had her HOA bylaws and violation notices. I had my supply contracts and delivery trucks. In the end, acting ethically and professionally mattered more than whatever temporary authority a position might grant. I was grateful for how everything had turned out. The business success was wonderful, but more than that, I appreciated living in a neighborhood where reasonable people enforced reasonable rules reasonably. It wasn't too much to ask, but as Patricia had shown, it wasn't always guaranteed either. The HOA drama was over, truly and completely finished. Norton Distribution was stronger than ever. My family was happy and healthy. And somewhere in North Scottsdale, Patricia Morrison was living in a house with no HOA, hopefully having learned that sometimes flexibility and understanding matter more than rigid enforcement of rules. Life was good, and it had all started with a forklift in a driveway and a woman who didn't know when to let things go. Sometimes the best victories were the ones where everyone eventually moved on to something better, even if the path to get there was rocky and contentious. I raised my glass of iced tea in a silent toast to unexpected journeys and karmic justice. Then I went back to enjoying my peaceful evening in my peaceful neighborhood, grateful for every twist and turn that had led me here.